Thank you. Thanks for that. And hello everybody, and thank you so much for having me. As you can see, the title of my talk's changed a bit because I think, as I said to a few people, I was quite cranky when I wrote my abstract. Not that I didn't want to get it in time, but I was just kind of thinking, when I go to lots of conferences, I spend a lot of my time arguing the case for social media and social networking and mobile and this kind of thing. So I kind of felt that maybe I had to come over here and argue the case yet again. So it was kind of like, well, this whole idea of the Transformative Museum, is it really happening? Are we really going to be there, or are we not? So that's kind of the headspace I was in. But I have to say, in the last 2 days, just going to different sessions and listening to the Keynote papers and the PhD day, as well as some of the streams yesterday, I was really heartened to see how up with the ideas of social media and participation are happening within this group. So that was really good. So might be preaching to the converted a bit, but what I'm really going to talk about is just some of these ideas around, if we really want to be a transformative museum, what does that actually mean for us as museum practitioners? What does it mean for us as researchers? What does it mean for us as often student people that are mentoring students or looking after students? But I just wanted to start He was an ichthyologist, which is a fish scientist, and at the museum we have a huge fish collection, and I love our fish people, so I'm really keen on this guy. So he was an ichthyologist, and he was also the secretary of the Smithsonian back in the late 1800s, and he wrote a lot about, well, what is the role of the museum? This is back in the 1800s, remember? And he was talking a lot about, and being a scientist, again, we have a lot of scientists at the museum, and that's another reason he resonates with me. But what he was talking about was that museums are about actually contributing to the advancement of learning, but he was talking also, it's about the diffusion of that knowledge. And I think that often we kind of forget that we've got these two parts to us. That's that whole research and collection element, and then getting that information out there. And then coming back to kind of closer to now, Stephen Weil, who probably most of you would have heard of and read a lot of his work, he's a very inspirational person, and he talked at this idea about museums stopping being about something to being for people, and this is the first kind of time I think that people started thinking, yes, actually museums are about our audiences and about the publics that we serve, not just about our own things. So what I've been thinking about a lot recently is this whole conjunction of how museums operate now, and I see that there's 3 spheres that we operate in, and I'll talk a little bit about the museum in these 3 spaces so that you can kind of get where I'm coming from and the work that I do. So we still have physical sites, obviously. That's the Australian Museum there. It was established in 1827 and built, the first building was built in about 1850, I think. It's a classical kind of museum, similar to natural history museums all over the world, the Field Museum, the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, Natural History Museum here to some degree. And it's also kind of a little bit different because we have anthropology as well as natural history. So we're about people, culture and nature. So our kind of remit is inspiring the exploration of nature and culture. So we really see that that's something we bring together. We get about 300, 400,000 visitors a year. We're actually trying to stretch that at the moment. And those of you who heard me talk on Monday, what day is it today? Thursday, Tuesday, talking a lot about how we can actually make more value out of people that are actually coming to our site, not only because we want to have a great experience and a great community of people, but because we actually need the income, to be honest. Then the other world that museums are involved with is the online world, obviously, and I include social media in that. And social media is a really key part of this. That's just an example of our Facebook page. And as I said earlier, if I went to a conference somewhere in Australia maybe, or even somewhere around our region, they'd be kind of saying, what are you showing your Facebook page for? But that's a very important part of how we communicate with our audiences. This is our website on that side. As I said on Tuesday, we've just relaunched our website. Our website is massive. It was established in 1995, and It was actually an interesting one because it came from the scientific community of the museum itself. The scientists really, and I think this goes back to George Brown Good's idea, the scientists really understand the way that you have to be global collaborators, because when they're working on a species, for example, it doesn't stop at the borders of Australia. So they were doing a lot of collaborations, and they figured out that we needed a website that was actually about animals and cultures and our collections. So our website was established in 1995. We redeveloped it in 2009, and then we've just relaunched the new site now. And we get around 10 million visitors to our website a year, which is pretty massive. When you looked at the Tate figures yesterday, I think someone showed 20 million. That's a pretty big organisation, but for a little niche museum, 10 million is pretty good. And a lot of people are coming to look for, I've seen a spider in my backyard, or something's bitten me, what is it? I just need to get some information. Or the other big part of visitation is the Indigenous areas of our website, because people are very interested in Australian Indigenous cultures. Interestingly, also, as I mentioned a little bit on Tuesday, we redeveloped our website. And we went down a trajectory of, well, this is the way we're going to do it, it's going to look like this. And then all of a sudden this thing called responsive design kind of started bubbling in our tech community. So we said, okay, well, now we've got to change trajectory. We've got to do a responsively designed website. What that means is that wherever you look at the website on whatever device, on this, an iPad, a Samsung, whatever, it just automatically changes to the way that your device works. So this is a really interesting thing for me, because for a change, it actually gives museums and non-profit organisations the power to actually not have to have a mobile site and not be beholden to these companies that ring you up all the time and say, I can build a mobile site. It's no, our site's responsive, and that's that. So that's kind of where we're looking at in the online world. And then increasingly, and I'll talk a bit about mobile during this paper, we're increasingly working in the mobile world as well. I mean, how many people here have got a smartphone? Probably everybody. And that's just where the world's heading, I think. So we're kind of looking at, we've got a couple of mobile apps out. The first one, Dangerous Australians, which gives you 45 dangerous animals, and you can have a look at them, you can see if something bites you. You can whip out your Dangerous Australians app, you can look up the animal, it can tell you, oh, you need to ring emergency, or you need to put a tourniquet on, or don't worry about it because you'll die. So that was our first one. It's pretty much a standard information-based one. Then we've got our Frogs Field Guide, which is starting to be a little bit more of this whole idea of engaging a community of people, which is people that are urban gardeners in Australia. We have a lot of that, and you can just go out into your backyard. It'll find out what are the frogs near you, and you can actually figure out which is that frog that you can hear in your backyard. And frogs are a really important part of the work that we do. We've got some frog scientists at the museum who are pretty well known, and also they're really good indicators of environmental problems. So once your frogs start dying off, then you know you're in trouble. But what I'm also being charged to do at the museum and thinking a lot about is how these actual three spaces intersect. So how can we actually provide a physical experience that takes what works online and what works in the mobile and what works in the physical space. So we're trying out a few things with a few grants that we've got this year, and probably this time next year I'll be able to report on them a bit more. But that's probably the challenge I see for our sector, is how we're actually going to bring these things together. So when I was thinking about what I would talk about, I came up with kind of six themes that I think are impacting on what we're calling the Transformative Museum. And what I'll do is just go through each of them and give you some examples. I'll give you some research that we've been doing and just raise some questions, and it'd be good just to have a discussion about them at the end of this. So, okay. All right. So Again, I don't know about you, but I don't tend to read books very much these days when I'm doing research. It's more about blogs and things that have come past my desk, or interesting things that people have tweeted to me. So I came across this post from MIT Press, which was kind of talking about humans being in this fourth great information age. So first of all, there was the invention of writing, then we went from the scroll to the codex, then the printing press. But what they were actually talking about is that we are in the fourth great information age, but what the internet has done is actually made everything a lot faster. So things are changing all the time. It's very stressful. And it's also most geographically extensive. And probably maybe 2-3 years ago, when mobile was starting to come in and the web and things like that, there was a lot of talk about, well, developing countries don't have access to this, but I think I was reading something about in India, the farmers that are using mobile technologies to find out where things are so that they can do their hunting and gathering or whatever and send things to market. So that it's all pervasive, so it's all around the world, and it's a big kind of disruption, I guess. So what does that mean for museums? Elaine Gurian, who's one of my heroes, who I read a lot of, and she's really been thinking about this idea of what the internet is. And what she says is, she gives a lovely example of, like, now in the past, in say a museum context, you would have people that have been working, or she gave the example of the Bureau of Meteorology. You've got people that have studied for years and years and years how to do climate, how to do this, how to do that. And she says now you just go outside, you look up, you send your photo to the newspaper, and then they publish it and say, oh, this is the weather in Roskilde today, or something like that. But what she's been talking about in some of the work that she's been doing, and this quote is from a chapter in a book that Fiona Cameron and I released 2 years ago, and it's a really good chapter, actually. Not that I'm selling the book, but she does talk about what is the role of the curator in this kind of world. And what she talks about here is actually it's not about the technology, which I think has been a really good theme of this conference. It's not about the technology, it's actually about the philosophical change in the way we think and the way we'll need to work in the future. So that's what she's talking about, it's a philosophical change. Okay, so one of the biggest changes online in the past 5 years has been the emergence of social media. And what social media does is it allows for social networks to form around common causes and around special interests. So here's just an example of, and this, I think I got this one last year and it's probably out of date even now. So these are the big 4 social networks that people are on. Of course, Facebook's the biggest, Twitter's getting up there, LinkedIn, I don't know, do you use LinkedIn here? People, is that something here? Yeah, I'm on it, but I find it a bit boring. And Google Plus is another one. So there's kind of all these networks that are around, and it's really all pervasive. YouTube also is probably would be the biggest social network, but I don't kind of include it as a social network. For me, it's more of a one-way channel, because if you actually look at some of the commentary and the interactions on there, it's a bit lame, I think. And also, people often talk about, well, Facebook's for young people. Well, actually, even though these figures are from 2010, this trajectory has continued. So the Facebook generation is actually people like you, people like me. It's the over 55s is the highest. Not that I'm over 55, well, we'll be soon. So it's one of the fastest growing groups, and the reason that is we're finding in Australia is a lot of people that have grandchildren, they have to get on Facebook because they're just not finding out what's happening in their grandchildren's world. They're not accessing photos, so they have to get onto these tools to do that. I just wanted to give an example. Oh, sorry, this is just another one that also frightens me a bit, and somebody talked about it at one of the sessions yesterday. Remember, he was showing a little person with an iPad as well, and these people, I mean, we just say, well, Google, and I gave an example on Tuesday, like the students that I spoke to just said, I will Google the information when we get home, we're just here to have a great social experience. These people won't even probably Google, they'll be doing something else, so who knows what's going to happen there. Anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about universities and how they're using social media, because universities are quite similar to museums in the terms of their educational, obviously, and also they're kind of large, lumbering institutions that are hard to change and move and shift. But some of the work that I've been looking at in the States is talking about, well, how do they use social media and how do they use Twitter in their practices. And as you can see here, in the States, all of them are using some form of social media. And I was at a seminar a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman from University of Technology, the university I went to, and she was talking about the importance of using Facebook as a way to not just gather students, but actually use it as a way for students to talk to each other and find out stuff about the university. There was also a really good posting by Mashable. I don't know if people follow Mashable. Mashable is this really interesting aggregation site where it just like takes everything that's been written about the web or social media or tech and just brings it into one place. So you can either look at Mashable online, or you can follow them on Twitter, or you can follow them on Facebook. So they're a really good, rich resource for finding out what's happening in the tech world. But they did this really interesting post and study last year or 2 years ago, where they looked at some of the professors and were asking, okay, well, how can you use Twitter in the classroom? What could it actually do for you? And one of the teachers was talking about this idea about classroom shyness, and how when you're in a big group, often people just don't engage, or it's dominated by one or two people. And when they started experimenting with Twitter, they found that often face-to-face you might just have 2 or 3 people joining the discussion, whereas on Twitter you've got probably 40 or 50 people that are actually actively involved, kind of underground a bit. And I was just talking to the guys this morning about our Twitter stream. I mean, I think there's about, who is this person that's tweeting? I'm dying to find out who it is. Come on, you're not here? Oh, it's you, okay. One of you? There's someone, well anyway, there's a couple of us that are tweeting, and what it actually means is that people from, say, my home country, from Australia, they're like, oh, Lynda's over at this conference, I might follow what she's doing and look at the papers, and every so often we'll tweet out the URL for the papers and say, look, there's this fantastic set of papers, here it is. And at the same time, there's a conference going on in Barcelona, Museum Next, and they've said, okay, well, we'll follow you and you follow us, and so we can actually kind of, you can attend a conference when you're not even there, or you can attend a conference from your lounge room. And often when, I don't go to museums and the web, it's a good conference to go to, but I don't go because I can't afford it, so I just follow it on Twitter, and you find that you can pick up quite a lot of what's going on. And that's what they were talking about in this particular study. And they're also finding that what Twitter does in this particular study, and what I've found when I've used it in a professional context, is that it actually broadens the way that you relate to people. So they found in this study that like people were tweeting about their class and let's have a link here and let's talk about this particular thing, but they also formed personal relationships. They started tweeting the football scores, or I don't know who was going to win Eurovision or something like that. So it was kind of it actually made the relationships between the students a lot more richer than it would. And as it says here, it's a real community of learners, people sharing, people commenting, people talking to each other. And as it says here, the conversations go beyond the classroom. And like with our Twitter stream, the conversations can keep going after the event's finished, which is really cool. So the Culture 24 report, which somebody talked about the other day, and they did a lot of work on, and this report's online. It's actually worth a read, the stuff that they're doing. I think it was Ross, you were talking about them, weren't you? Yeah. So they were looking at all the different sites in England, in the UK, and looking at the amount of followers they had. This isn't like a huge figure, but like since 2010, that would have increased quite a lot. And there's a kind of subculture of people out there that are tweeting. I mentioned it the other day. There's this funny, do you all know what a hashtag is? Yeah, no? Okay, well a hashtag, if you put hash something, that's the way that you follow a thread. Because what happened when Twitter first was introduced, it was kind of like all this stuff, it's just going. So what you can do is now, using tools such as TweetDeck, you can actually just follow the threads. So you can just have it all on your laptop or your iPad, and you just follow the different conversations. So it's just like having your own personal conversation. So there's this group called Museum Mascots, and they're kind of iconic museum objects that tweet, such as the Scream, such as this Oisin the deer, who I don't know much about, but this deer has got a massive following. It must be some famous thing over in the UK. There's also the shark in formaldehyde. What's that called? The Damien Hirst one. That tweets as well. And it's kind of, people say to me, well, this is a stupid waste of time, because we've got a couple of things that tweet, and I actually tweet as a fish. But what it actually does is it makes the museum a bit more human, it makes it a bit more fun and playful and lighthearted, and actually shows people that museums can be kind of just like you and I as well. So these kinds of things are really quite fun, and as I said, they just show the museum in a different light. And also what they do is they still can get people interested in the objects, because whenever the deer tweets or someone tweets, they say, okay, well, here's an object in our collection that you might be interested in, here's something that the museum's doing that you might be interested in. So it's kind of extending that relationship through something that's a bit lighthearted and fun. Right, how much time going? We've been conducting a lot of research into visitors and non-visitors' use of social media. We've been doing it since 2007. The most recent study we just finished was in 2012 in March, which is why some of this stuff's all a bit, I've only just been getting the data in. So that's just some interesting facts and figures. We've worked with families, we've worked with young adults through a program that we run. We've worked with students, both at the museum, and we've also worked with kind of the general Sydney audience. So I've done quite a few online surveys of 1,000 people in the Greater Sydney region just to find out the kinds of things they're doing. But what we're finding consistently is that when you compare the data of people that visit museums and people that don't, is that people that visit museums are using social media tools that are two-way. They're using, even in this very early stuff, they're commenting more, they're reading blogs more, they're on social networks more than people that don't visit museums. So that's kind of starting to tell us that people that come to museums are more engaged in these things anyway. And when you think about it, it's probably not surprising, because people that visit museums are usually more highly educated, more engaged with things. But I think this is something that we really need to take a handle on, because these people are actually active on these sites. And since I compared these ones, we've also been doing more work. So, for example, we've done, in 2010 we did a couple of studies. We did our own visitors that were at the museum, and also did a big study of Sydney-siders, 1,000 people. And what we were finding in 2010 is that things like watching videos, so YouTube was increasing, and that's standard because that's happening. You can see here in this 2010 study, the people that were at the museum, 57% of them were on a social networking site, and mostly that's Facebook. In May 2010, 71% were telling us that they were on Facebook. And then in the most recent study we did in March this year, admittedly it was with a younger audience, but 91% of those people had a Facebook account and were active on Facebook. Another example of blogging, and blogging is quite an interesting case in point, because blogs were massive, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, and then they kind of fell out of favour because for whatever reason. And then what I saw happen was, with the emergence of Twitter, that blogging came back in, because what you could actually do is you could write a blog piece, and then just tweet it out to people. And so it was a way of, you could actually get readership rather than just putting a blog out there and kind of wondering who was actually reading it, which we've been doing blogging for a long time at the museum. You kind of think, well, who's actually reading these blogs? But now with Twitter, you just tweet out, just done this blog post, just done this, and you get more of a readership. So for example, that's 44% that read blogs here. In the study that we did of Sydney-siders, there was 52% that read a blog, and then the most recent one in March, there was 80% of people that were either reading blogs or being bloggers themselves. We also asked people in every study we've done, we always ask them how comfortable they are with technology, and interestingly, even since 2007, people have kind of felt very comfortable. So for example, when we asked them in May last year, 63% were talking about, well, I'm pretty comfortable or extremely comfortable with technology, and 31% were okay with it. So I'm finding the patterns with our visitors and with people that live in Sydney is that people are feeling that they're okay with it, with over half describing themselves as early adopters of technology. Okay, what am I doing here? Has anybody heard of Pinterest? Oh, good, excellent. Yeah, Pinterest is really interesting. It's this social site where you just pin pictures basically to boards. It's really quite, it's just one of those things that it's tapped into something and it's exploded. And apparently it's more of a female skew. And interestingly with Pinterest, it was actually, it's something that women have really taken on board and in a techno sense, because women aren't necessarily aligned with technology sometimes. It's something that's really taken off in that audience, in that segment. So Pinterest was the third most used social media platform in the United States last year, after Facebook and Twitter. So, you know, and even more than LinkedIn, and that's probably in about 3 months this thing's just massively grown. So as I said, it's a pinboard style social photo sharing website. But the thing about Pinterest is actually you just links directly to your Facebook and Twitter accounts. So you don't actually have to find another audience for these. You just pin something and it goes directly to your Facebook page. And that's why I'm really surprised that a lot of you have heard about it, but I guess given the demographic of this audience, probably not. We did ask our young people at our event, and even then there was almost half of these people had heard of Pinterest. So it's just something that I think we need to be aware of, because it's actually what a lot of these social media tools, it actually provides for a museum that's has no money. Lots of museums have no money. They're really interesting, easy, free online tools that you can use to engage with an audience and get your content out there. Although I've got to talk, is anybody from the National Museum here? No. Oh yeah, I just want to find out how they set this, because I'm trying to set it up for the museum and I haven't been able to have much luck there, but anyway, it'd be good. Okay. So I guess what this all means is that the Pinterest example in my case was that younger museum visitors were adopting this stuff very quickly. We need to continually monitor these sites, we need to find out the trends, and we need to regularly ask our physical visitors about what they're doing online, because that's going to affect how they then want to engage with us. Okay, the second theme, and I'm going to move through these a bit more faster now, is obviously mobile. It's here, it's everywhere, we've all got smartphones. The David Hockney exhibition I saw at the Royal Ontario Museum, and that was really interesting. It was a whole exhibition of just all his drawings on iPads, and they were absolutely beautiful. And he's talking about, well, this is the way that I do my art now, and this is the way that I engage with people now. I spoke the other day about museum websites, and there's a really good post by a guy called Coven Smith. I think he's from Minneapolis Museum or something, and he does a whole YouTube video on what's the point of a museum website. Do we even need websites anymore? Ralph Appelbaum, who's that famous museum architect, he was speaking at a conference I was at back in 2008, and he said that visitors will come to the museum with more technology in their pockets than it's possible for you to have in your whole museum. So mobile is really affecting the ways that we communicate, the ways we access information, and it's becoming more ubiquitous. And somebody mentioned that word. They wanted the choir to sing ubiquitous yesterday, but that kind of didn't get up. Would have been interesting. Oh, okay, so that's the points I wanted to make. Another really good blog to follow it's called the Google Mobile Ad Blog, and it sounds like it's an advertisement for Google, but it's not. They actually do report on a lot of research that they're doing. And they talked about, well, who are the highest countries that have smartphone penetration, and of course it was Australia, which we were very happy about. Norway was another one of the big six. Denmark, New Zealand, I just picked out the countries of people that I thought were here, 40%. So again, it's really becoming mainstream. And as they've said here, it's actually driving how people actually shop, how we watch TV, how we watch things like the Eurovision Song Contest, or how we even watch the football, because when I'm over here, I can't watch my local team, so I'm just following the Twitter stream. So, and I'm doing that on my mobile phone. So what they're finding is even in shopping behaviour, that people are in store and they're still actually using their mobile phones to try and get better deals from somewhere, and then perhaps they might buy from the physical store, perhaps they might just buy from the online store. Oh God, sorry. No, it's just telling me I've spoken for 30 minutes, so I won't speak for too much longer.
I thought there was a goal.
No. Okay, so I won't go on any more about the surveys. We've been surveying people about smartphone use since May 2011. And it's been really interesting just seeing the difference back then, certainly in Sydney, we all have iPhones, but now it's really diversifying. So that's really important for us as a museum to know, because we've got to think about, well, what platforms are we going to put our mobile stuff on, and can we actually get away from actually having to be beholden to either an Apple or an Android model, which we're trying to look at as well. QR codes, I've noticed them a lot around here, and we've again been surveying our visitors about QR codes, and we're finding that a lot of them don't even know what they are, which I think is interesting, and I wouldn't kind of worry about that, because even 5 years ago, if we'd have asked people about Twitter, we'd get very tiny things, but then it's kind of exploded. So I think personally QR codes are something worth looking at for museums. But it's actually often not a great visitor experience, because I couldn't get wireless in the National Museum, and then I couldn't do all this. So I think, again, a lot of the time we go down this tech solution without kind of thinking, well, what is the actual visitor experience, and what do we really want people to be doing? Been looking a bit about this idea of mobile learning, and what I'm trying to talk about in our sector is that we need to be focusing on the learning and the pedagogy rather than just the technology. And what I'm finding is that with mobile app development, and it was great to hear Angela yesterday, but in a lot of museums, they're just getting on the bandwagon. We've got to get an app for this, we've got to get an app for that, without really thinking about the learning. And I think what mobile learning does is it actually can show museums what kind of learning can happen in a mobile environment, and how can that then be translated to the on-site physical environment. And I gave a paper last year, which I can give you the URL to it, where I actually looked at the theory of constructivism, which is one that I still really love in terms of museum learning. And I looked at how that applied across the physical, online and mobile environments. And you can actually see that it's something like constructivism, which is very learner-focused, very sharing and participatory kind of theory, actually works across all of those things. And I'm thinking that that's kind of some way that we can actually get these three spheres together in our physical sites. Mobile means that we have to change the ways that we work. We have to be agile development people now. And again, I can send you a link. The link's all in here, actually. I've written a piece about what agile development is and what it means for museums. And the thing that I'm kind of most interested in museum sense, and certainly in my own institution, is that we're often exhibition-led. So I think, again, someone was saying the other day, it takes years to get an exhibition together, and they're expensive and take a lot of time. But what agile means is that you've just got to get out there and do something. I think you were saying that they just went in a week and went in and just did an intervention within a physical space. So what I'm kind of querying is whether museums are going to be able to do this kind of agile mode when they're so tied into a modality of big project teams, big budgets, long timelines. So I think the jury's still out on that, and I know that whenever I raise that in our organisation about we're too much exhibition-led, I don't really get very far with that, but anyway. The other thing is that by being tied to an exhibition-led model is that we kind of think in museums that, well, okay, when the exhibition opens, that's it, we all go on holidays, we don't do anything with it again, it just sits there. What agile means is that actually nothing is ever finished. I think one of the best pieces of advice I got from one of my mentors was that, well, 80% is just good enough, because you're never going to finish anything these days, so you just got to get on with it. And agile development processes are really something that we need to be thinking about. Okay, we're all digital learners. Who's heard of the Horizons report? Yeah, some people. Okay. Again, I've got it referenced in here, but it's something, there's the most recent museums one came out last year, and what the Horizons people do is they gather a whole range of experts in the fields from all across different cross-disciplines, and they look at, well, what are the trends and what does this mean for museums? What does it mean now in the next 12 months? What does it mean 2 to 3 years? What does it mean 5 years out? And even back then, this was the 2010 report, they were starting to look at this thing about mobile, open content and augmented reality, which are things that are happening right now. We also do a lot of work with teachers, and when we launched our new website, we got a whole bunch of teachers in and said, okay, well, what's happening in your world? What do we need to be thinking about in the future? So we had a couple of these things called Web to Classroom workshops, where basically, they came in, looked at our website, told us what they didn't like about it, what we needed to do, and they also started talking about what they were thinking are trends. And it's interesting to compare what they're saying to the Horizons report, because they were talking about how teachers are now facilitators, how their roles are changing, how students, and I guess we get this too in universities, students just expect instant feedback because we live in a 24/7 world. I've handed my assignment in, why haven't you marked it like immediately? Well, yeah. E-books is another thing, in e-publishing, which is something that I know that some museums are looking at, but it was interesting for me, for the teachers, it was a very big issue for them because they were worried about students carrying these big heavy backpacks, and they just said we've just got to go to e-books just for health and safety reasons. And they're also talking a lot about this whole idea of the social and collaborative learning. So that's just that one. The fourth theme is this idea that we've been talking about a lot here, which has been fantastic, this whole idea of sharing authority in the participatory museum. Dan Spock did it. There's a very good there's journals called The Exhibitionist. I think it's the journal of the exhibitions people in the States, and they did a whole journal art book thing on visitors, user-centered design, and there's some really good examples in there, and there's a good example of some work that we did at the museum when we were developing an exhibition on evil, and we used a blogging tool and we used a Facebook to actually crowdsource and get people interested and give us ideas for content. So he talked about some work that he was doing and how he had a bit of an argument with the conservators in the museum because there was some chair that couldn't be left in the sun, but he just said, well, actually this is important to the community and this chair has to be out there. And he was talking about, well, if you're inviting people to participate, your own communities, it really has to change the museum. And this idea of open content, which the Horizons report talked about, is another one that I think museums are going to have to be thinking about in the future. Oh, I've got a spelling mistake there, that's a shame. Oh, we've got a few spelling mistakes. I did this one last night. Might just read on from there. Okay, so this idea of shared authority, and you can see some of the work. The Smithsonian's been fantastic, I have to say, leading the way here. So there's the app, I don't know, has anybody seen Leaf Snap? That's pretty cool. You go and snap a leaf and then you can send it back and they can add it to their collection or something. So this idea of citizen science, and mobile allows you to do that. Participation, this is a really lovely example. Again, coming back to my idea of fish, they actually used Facebook to help, what does it say here? Yeah, they had all these fish specimens and they didn't know what to do with them. And I've heard a few of these examples here yesterday that they just put them on Facebook and said, okay, who can help do this? And then this idea of professional collaboration, using things like Twitter, as I've talked about, using streams where we all sit on there and share stuff. Okay, so we're Generation C. Nielsen did a study, and I think the thing I love about this is that they had this whole idea of I share, therefore I am, which I think is quite cute. As you can see, even 10, 15 years ago, remember when we had websites, copyright everything, can't use this, must email us, and now it's just click here, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, email it to your friends, blah, 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 blah. Okay. All right, I've also been thinking a lot about, well, what's in our toolkits? What does all this mean for us as museum workers? And I think there's a whole different range of skills that we need. We're going to have different work environments in the future. We're going to be more talking about this kind of stuff that We're platforms, we're facilitators, we're storytellers. We still produce content, but we actually put stuff out there for people to innovate and use it themselves. But what I'm suggesting probably, and what I usually do at work, I don't even think I'm going to need a desk anymore. I'm just going to need my iPad, TweetDeck. So my toolkit now, I think, I just need a tablet computer, which is my iPad, I need a smartphone, I need Facebook, I need TweetDeck, and I need WordPress, and I need my community of people. So that's probably what my toolkit will consist of in the future. This is an example of last year the Australian government was preparing a digital culture policy, developing a cultural policy, and they just did it all online. And interestingly, they had the wiki going, they had the Twitter stream going, they had the Facebook page going, but we all got together face to face. So I'm not advocating that we can't actually do all of that. It's kind of coming back to my original idea of the physical, the online and the mobile. At some point we are physical beings and we need to get together. Okay, so to finish off and go back to what George Brown Good was talking about, again, it's not about specimens in glass cases, it's about ideas. And saying this back in the 1800s, I think is pretty cool. And I was just wondering what he'd make of the world that we have today. Elaine, again, she's talking about we're not a singular authority anymore, we're actually a participant and encourager of intellectual and social engagement amongst our visitors. And I would say amongst our visitors, wherever they happen to be, and they don't necessarily be on the physical site. So what will our organisations look like? We'll need to be a lot less worried about things, we'll need to let go, we'll need to be very well networked, very well connected, and we'll be participatory, which actually we've talked a lot about at this conference, which has been great. What will our jobs be like? This is very scary for people. I go and give a talk at my son's school and to parents, because I'm kind of the token techno woman person, and they have a jobs thing every year, and you just sit in a room and the parents come and the boys come in and you just talk about what you do. And I always say to the parents, because they're all very concerned, they have to go to uni, they have to do this, they have to do that. Well, actually the best thing you can do for your kid is just to make sure that they're skilled in life, because 5 years time we don't know what jobs will be. Who knew that there'd be a social media person on your team even 4 years ago? And our jobs are just changing all the time. Some of the work by this woman, Beth Novak, she was in the Obama administration very early on, when the whole idea was to open up the US government and all the processes and stuff. And it's a very interesting book. I've got it referenced in here. She's got some very interesting ideas in here about, well, actually what this actually can do for government is change the institutions and change the way they work. This is a very nice quote. It's back again quite a few years ago now, but the idea is that actually what this does is it puts the user at the centre of the organisation and not us. And even though it's scary, it's actually a bit more exciting. I mean, aren't we a bit tired of just sitting in a room looking at objects? It's much more fun to be collaborative and getting out there. So we have our changing audiences. They're having changing expectations. They can do whatever they like. They can access information wherever they like. So now power is really in the hands of this Generation C. They've got the power of information, the power of voting with their feet, whether they'll come to the museum or not, that kind of thing. And I just wanted to briefly revisit something I did put in the abstract, which was about this idea of, well, can we still have the 21st century museum or the Transformative Museum with 19th century skills? And I actually put this out on, I think it was out on my Facebook page, and said, look, I'm kind of thinking about this, what do you think? And all these people got back to me and said, actually, in the 19th century, they had really incredible skills. As they say here, they were inventors, they were researchers, all the things that they came up with. I don't know if you know of Heston Blumenthal here, but one of his shows, he actually does it on the Victorians, and it's just fantastic, the kinds of things that they invented and what they were doing. So it's kind of like, what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got all these skills that we already have in our institutions, it's just that we need to repackage them for the 21st century museum. So just to finish, all our audiences will be better connected, they'll be more informed, they'll be probably older and more culturally diverse, as we've heard around the traps here. And this whole idea of they'll be architects of their own learning, so it's really constructivism revisited. They'll be able to do what they want. they'll be active participants. So what we need to be is, again, this idea I've been toying with, when you think about those 3 spheres of the museum, it's really, we're now museums without walls because we can actually be wherever we want to be and wherever our users are. So that's it from me. That's my details. That's the hashtag for the conference if anybody's on Twitter and wants to follow it. Yeah, so that's all I want to say, and we can have some discussion, hopefully. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lynda, for a very interesting and provocative